when you started to see how much work these guys put in, how many hours actually go into one moment that happens on the field that we all see and criticize and comment on, like what was the most surprising part about that for you?
Yeah, first of all, I'm glad that comes across, because it is the sort of the most interesting part of doing the show, which is, I mean, it should be dumb in theory, right? It's like we get to the end of every episode and we're like, oh, it turns out pro athletes are really good at what they do, and like that should be fairly obvious. Yeah. And it's sort of like, yeah, you idiot, like how big of an ego do you have that you think you could do this?
Welcome into the Train with the Best podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman.
Chris Gorres.
And this is episode 201.
201.
Big ups. Thanks to everyone for all of the love on episode 200. Our guest today is Clay Skipper from GQ, as we told you last week. We actually just record, like chronologically speaking, you're hearing this first, but we just got done recording with Clay, 90 seconds ago. He's awesome. So freaking good. Such a great conversation. So you'll hear that in just a few minutes. But Chris, man, the love for episode 200 is real, and it's been really cool kind of looking back, and it's almost some forced reflection this week, and it's felt good for everybody to say all the nice things. So just wanted to, on the podcast, say we appreciate it. And what's some of the feedback that you've gotten?
Yeah, I mean, all positive feedback, obviously. People who were excited to be on there, people who were bummed out that they didn't get the video in on time. But, just everybody
Come
who's
on.
Yeah, people are busy, so it's all good.
Yeah.
I'm never the type of person like, yo, I need this. So, but yeah, people who are reaching out and talked about just to hear people like Wes Dunning talk about how influential we've been and how he listens to the podcast. Like people like Robin White out in San Francisco who is always pushing our stuff out there. Zach DeBrani. Just for the longtime listeners, for the people who have been with us for quite some time, and for the people who actually take the shit that we say and use it, like it's really cool to see what kind of footprint we've had on whatever it is that you want to call it, the fitness industry, the media content, whatever it is that you want to call it.
Yeah, it's definitely been cool. And, I didn't I guess I knew we'd reflect a little bit in there, but I didn't expect kind of to get emotional doing it. Like the end piece where it just kind of was like almost an out of body experience in the expressing gratitude of what it's been, and like kind of just letting it flow. That wasn't something like sometimes in moments like that where I know, like in past radio shows, for instance, like I don't think I've ever necessarily done this on the podcast, but in radio shows where whether the subject matter demanded something a little bit more thought out, or the moment from a personal aspect demanded something, or was going to call on something that was a little more elevated, like I'll write something out. It's a skill that I have, fortunately, in the broadcast world of being a pretty good writer. But that was just straight off the cuff and just straight from the heart of saying like, hey, this is what it is, and who we are and who we've been and what we're trying to do. And that was that. I didn't anticipate that happening, because like none of the questions necessarily, like I knew like when we would talk about each other, like that would be meaningful in a different kind of way. But just like the general overall, I don't want to say like it's not pressure, but like the magnitude of it all hitting me in that moment, I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that to happen.
Well, it's like you said, like this is an authentic show, and we don't script anything, and everything just kind of flows the way it flows, right? And I guess that's a little bit of me too. Like I can be lighthearted, and I can be jovial, and I can also be pretty serious, and that's just who I am. This is what you get with me, and with you as well. So like it's not something that we have to push to make authentic, because then it becomes staged and quite disingenuous, but. The stuff like Lorenzo's questions about know your why, like I think that's what this podcast is really all about is, when you know your why, it's one thing to know your why, right? We talk about that with Simon Sinek and all the other stuff, but to surround yourself with people who are also in the same why is what this podcast is all about, right? Like introducing you to people that the guests that we have on this show that share a similar aspiration that maybe you do as a listener, and to surround yourself with that. And to keep yourself in that is keeping your purpose.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Our guest today, his purpose is both educate and entertain, which is in some ways, like, obviously we talked about some of the deeper purposes and everything last week, but in a lot of ways, like, that's our goal, is to be informative and but also to educate and ultimately to entertain. Because if it's just like information, like, you can go read articles online for that. You got to give you something a little bit more, and there are a few that are doing it better in a very unique way than Clay Skipper and GQ, and specifically through his YouTube series Above Average Joe. We talked to him about that. We talked to him about his writing. We talked to him about his training. He's an athlete himself, a runner, and it was a really great conversation. And you're going to hear it next here on the Train with the Best podcast. The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by Super Coffee, who's got brand new flavors, and they're tasty. In fact, it's the Tasty Pastry. Yeah, that's the new line from Super Coffee, and it's a bit of a silly name, Tasty Pastry. Just rolls off the tongue in the way it might in a kindergarten-esque kind of way. Hey, I want the Tasty Pastry. Yeah, that's what you want. But the thing is, we're all kindergartners at heart, which is why Super Coffee created these delicious flavors. Blueberry muffin, caramel waffle, cinnamon bun. Come on, tell me you're not intrigued. Let's say you just want to try them. Well, they have a 3-pack with one of each, the trial box. They have a trial pack. I just got one. I'm really excited. Next week, I'll be able to talk about tasting these flavors in the ad because I will have had them. Comes in a 12-pack. Get 4 of each. Delicious. You ready to commit to one or the other? Go ahead. Dive right in with your 12-pack and do it all right now at drinksupercoffee.com. You use the code TRAINWITHTHEBEST and you get 25% off. So that's a pretty good deal. 25% off your first order. drinksupercoffee.com. Try them out. The new Tasty Pastry Collection. They're tasty. The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by Jaku and the Jaku Speed System. If you're a speed athlete and you're not getting accurate times, how do you know if you're getting better? Simple question. The best way to run fast is to go fast. But in order to really, really push your limits, you need to test that. So get yourself a Jaku. It's an affordable system to get accurate timing unlike any other on the market. No fancy lasers, no $1,000 whatever other systems out there. This is an app on your phone that pairs with a watch that you get from Jaku, and it starts on your first movement, and it stops when you cross the finish line. And unlike any other speed system out there, it can get multiple laps, meaning you can do shuttle drills like the 5-10-5, your pro agility type of drills. So you can really challenge yourself and know that you're getting consistent, accurate timing, rep after rep, set after set, session after session. Best way to do this? Come on. You think we don't have a discount for you? Jaku.com/discount/TWTB. That's Jaku, JAWKU.com/discount/TWTB, as in train with the best. It's 20% off the Jaku Speed System or anything else on their website. Jaku.com/discount/TWTB, and check them out on Instagram at Jaku Speed. Our guest today on the Train with the Best podcast is a staff writer at GQ. He's also the star and host of the YouTube series Above Average Joe that GQ does. He's done a podcast for GQ. Got a really cool kind of life story and career story as well, and interested in a lot of the same topics that we are. So after reading a little bit more about him and watching the YouTube series, wanted to have him on. It's Clay Skipper. Clay, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Thank you guys for having me on. And congratulations. I saw you just hit 200 episodes.
Yeah, thank you.
We did.
We can actually pinpoint the exact time where you guys ran out of interesting guests, which is 5 years and 200 episodes, and now you have to have me on. So thank you.
You give yourself not enough credit. I want to start with the YouTube series. That's how I found your stuff, and I sent it to Chris, and I was like, hey, watch this. This seems pretty cool. Because I feel like that's actually, in a way, like, it captures a topic that we sometimes talk about on the podcast over these last 200 episodes of just how special really elite athletes are at what they do, how hard it is to do the tasks that they perform. And I think you do a really good job in the YouTube series of not just trying to do them, but to then also give the context of like, okay, I'm trying to hit a 90-mile-per-hour fastball, but I didn't have to guess if a curveball was coming. And, you know, I'm not trying to situationally hit. And like you do give the caveats of all those kinds of things. So I'm curious how the idea for the YouTube series came up and kind of how you ultimately got it off the ground.
Yeah, it's a good question. People ask a lot, like, how did it come to be? And honestly, I can't quite remember. I think that GQ was a little late to the video game, I will say. And so we, you know, like I would say 4 or 5 years ago, we were trying to be like, what can we do in the way of video? And we had this concept, and I don't know who came up with it, but it was called Mere Mortal. And the idea was basically what Above Average Joe became, which is, can a mere mortal or a civilian or, for lack of a better word, a normal person with a minimal amount of training do a feat that a professional athlete makes look super easy? So, kicking a 30-yard field goal looks very routine for an NFL kicker. How easy is it for a average Joe? An NBA three-point contest, how difficult is that? So that was the original iteration, is this idea called mere mortal, and we that became Above Average Joe. We tried it. The first one we ever did was a hockey slap shot, which was a terrifying one to do first. It was like, can we stop a 90-mile-an-hour slap shot? If I'm being completely honest, I don't think in the final challenge the opponent, who was Anson Carter, former NHL player, actually got to 90 miles an hour, but it was definitely like above 80. So that was the first one. It did well, and then we just kept doing them from there, and we saw a good response. And so it's sort of, I think that one was beginning of 2019, and we've probably done 7 or 8 episodes since. So it's sort of they've been stretched out because of the pandemic and other things like that. But that was it just sort of has snowballed from that first episode.
Yeah, I think the first one that I ever actually saw was the one that you did when you were doing free throws, and a buddy of mine, Drew Hanlon, was the one that was helping you out, and I think you did some stuff with Ray Allen as well, just kind of shooting free throws. And I remember there was a show back in the day called Pros versus Joes, where like pro athletes, and this would be like pro athletes who are 10 years, 15 years past retirement, and they would play against regular Joes. And I think even like Jerry Rice was on the show at one point, because Jerry Rice is just so competitive. And
Jerry Rice loves to still do stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, I can still run a 4.840.
Right.
Watch me.
Right.
I'm
He doesn't want
52
people to
years old.
forget. Yeah.
And they would go and they would compete against some of these guys and just get blown out of the water, right? But I think that the cool thing about your channel and your show on YouTube is it shows the work that gets put in. Not just competing against these guys and seeing how good they are. That's one thing. But then seeing some of the work that actually goes into, like, hey, if you want to be a 90% shooter from the free throw line, yeah, that's a lot of work that you have to put in. And there's more to it than just making free throws. So talk a little bit about that. Like, how when you started to see how much work these guys put in, how many hours actually go into one moment that happens on the field that we all see and criticize and comment on. Like, what was the most surprising part about that for you?
Yeah, first of all, I'm glad that comes across, because it is the most interesting part of doing the show, which is, I mean, it should be dumb in theory, right? It's like we get to the end of every episode and we're like, oh, it turns out pro athletes are really good at what they do. And like that should be fairly obvious.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, yeah, you idiot. Like, how big of an ego do you have that you think you could do this?
Yeah.
But I would say, and to your point about the free throw specifically, I also got a sense of the pressure, right? Because if you watch that video, I was hitting them real well in practice. And then the minute it was the final showdown, which, I know it's going to live on YouTube and some people are going to watch it, all of a sudden I completely choke and cave, right? So you get a sense of what it's like to be up there having to hit 2 free throws, tie ball game, 3 seconds to go. But I will say that the thing that stands out to me is it's just what they do is so complicated. So on one hand, obviously it's hard. Like shooting an NBA three-pointer, it just takes a level of muscle memory and strength that I just don't have. But you can kind of know that just in the abstract without doing it. The thing that's really interesting is all the other factors that go into it. It's like, for instance, it never occurred to me, for whatever reason, that an NBA three-point contest would be such a cardiovascularly challenging activity.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm getting up there, and the whole time leading up to it, I'm like, am I going to be able to reach the basket? Am I going to, how many am I going to make? It never even occurred to me I might be out of breath. And by the second rack, I'm like, ready to vomit, and I'm like, this adds a whole different layer of complication that I hadn't even considered. And so that's been sort of the cool thing about the show, is like, obviously this is hard, we know it's hard, but to see how difficult it is, like, again, with the throwing a football, it's like the technique of throwing a football is difficult, but then you factor in having to change the play at the line, the 5 guys the size of Aaron Donald coming at you, the fact that you have like less than a second to get it out. It's all that really makes it super, super interesting.
I remember doing a workout. So Chris trained Lorenzo Alexander, who played 14 years in the NFL, and Randall Cobb worked with him for a couple years. And I remember being in a workout with Chris, Lorenzo, and I think Randall was there that day too. And for some reason, I was the quarterback and Lorenzo was actually coming after me. And all I had to do was toss the ball out to the side to make Lorenzo pivot or whatever. It was predetermined. It was premeditated. The speed at which he came at me, knowing he wasn't going to hit me, and thinking, oh my God, there would be 4 to 7 of them coming, and I'm supposed to read a defense like this, was hellaciously terrifying.
Yeah.
I never want to do that again, ever, in my whole life. And that's one snap.
And the other big thing is it's muscle
one-on-one
memory.
drill.
So much of it is muscle memory, right? These guys aren't thinking about it. And so the premise of the show is meant to expose me because it's meant to give you a sense of how difficult it is. But the idea that I could train in one day and get this, it's like the coaches they're such good sports, but they're a little bit flabbergasted because they're like, dude, this isn't happening for you. These guys have done this their whole life. So
the other thing too is from a sports science perspective, the interesting part about it, we talked about this a little bit in the 200th episode about what's coming next as far as training for youth athletes is that cognitive stuff, because what you say is completely correct. Shooting a basketball, swinging a baseball bat, throwing a football, all of that is muscle memory. But those things don't just happen predetermined on the field. Those are decisions that you make. And when you make decisions, that also takes a lot of your brain power, right? Should I shoot the ball right now? Should I pass the ball, right? So you'll see so many times in the NBA, if you just watch an NBA game or watch a few NBA games, people who are not traditionally good shooters, right? They shoot 20, 30% from three-point land, right? If they get the ball last second on the shot clock, they're going to make that shot because there's no decision to make. It's all right, let me just go straight into my shooting form. I don't have to think about anything. I don't have to read anything. My choice is made for me. They're going to make that shot versus when there's no predetermination of what they should do, they're a lot less effective shooter, right? Because that brain power is they call it brain cache, there's no more cash left over to get into that muscle memory that they've worked on. So it's a really interesting thing, and that's something that I'm glad that your show points that out. Hey, this is just building the muscle memory, but then in an actual game time situation, this is a decision that's made. This is not something that's saying ready, set, go, swing your bat, or ready, set, go, throw the football.
How great would that be? I'm going fastball, ready, set, go.
So that's such an insightful and perceptive point and the thing that really showed that to me was the baseball episode, and again the way this show works because of the incredible crew who makes it, and also the coaches. The coaches are what makes the show. And if you watch that episode, the coach, as I say this, I'm forgetting his name, so I'm so sorry to not give credit where credit's due. But he
was
said
this
to me at one
the football
point,
guy?
No, this is the baseball.
Baseball.
And,
so Quincy was your quarterback's coach.
Quincy,
He's a riot.
He's
I want to talk about him in a second, but I can't remember the baseball coach either.
So the baseball episode, the coach tells me just to swing as hard as I can. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I have to see the ball and then swing. He's like, no, you just swing as hard as you can. And so he threw a pitch. I swung as hard as I can, and I hit the ball. And it was this thing of where he's like, your brain is processing the ball, where the ball is coming outside your conscious awareness. So to your point, Chris, it's it's a sort of muscle memory that almost isn't even, you're not cognizant of it happening.
Correct.
And so it is this it's super, it was really eerie because I was like, how am I going to hit the ball if I don't look at it? He's like, no, just swing as hard as you can. Your body will find it. And it did.
Yeah.
Yeah. You actually recently wrote about shame, and you talked to an author who had written a book that touched on that. And I think that also ties back to the discussion about this show, because you have to be willing to put yourself out there. And I had this moment, so we just did this video with Nick Simmons, and as we were planning on that, and it wound up being Nick versus Lorenzo in a NFL Combine, and there was a point in the planning where we thought I might also go in, and for a moment I was excited because I was like, oh, I get to see what my times are, and then I was like, I'm gonna look so slow and so unathletic and so out of place in this stupid thing because I'm facing a former NFL player and a former Olympian, and I am not anywhere close to either. Yet you go out there every single episode and you are willing to put yourself out there, get coached, and see whatever happens, pre-coaching and post-coaching. At what point in the process of, this idea coming to life and ultimately doing the show, did you have that moment where you're like, oh, right, I'm doing all this stuff on camera and the results are what they are and they're out on the internet for everybody to see? And was there any hesitation that you had to go through with that?
That's a great question. A little bit. I mean, I think those thoughts came up mostly before the actual filming. Like, for instance, the hockey one, that was our first one, so I was already sort of apprehensive. But then the fact of like, oh, I'm gonna have to be like very scared on camera was made me apprehensive. Baseball is the same way because 90-mile-an-hour fastball. I actually quit baseball when it went from coach pitch to machine pitch because I was so scared of the ball. So I was like, I'm gonna be scared on camera. And there is that element of like, oh, I might be embarrassed. But honestly, I assume you guys know this from being athletes, real athletes. I wouldn't put myself in the same category. But if you have that competitive fire, once you're in there, then you're just sort of competing, and so that part of my brain sort of switches off, and I don't usually think too much about. Is this going to be embarrassing? But a little bit. I mean, like the field goal episode, I choked. I went 0 for 9 on field goals, and I'm like, this is going to live on the internet forever. But it's all right as long as you don't look at the comments. It's usually fine. And also, the comments in these YouTube videos are shockingly nice. So I don't know what that's about. I have like a suspicion that someone's going in there and scrubbing the mean ones, but it hasn't been terrible so far.
Those GQ editors, give them a raise.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Has there ever been an episode where you felt like confident about it? Like, hey, I'm actually good at this. I did this in my past. I feel like this one is for sure. I got this one, and then it didn't work out. Which one was the episode where you thought, hey, I for sure got this?
It's the basketball one, which is hysterical because I got smoked. We did, for people listening, I tried to do an NBA 3-point shooting contest like they do in the All-Star game. So it's 25 balls, 1 minute. And I actually went up against Joe Harris, who at the time, this is 2020, was the reigning 3-point champ.
Yep.
And I hit 2 out of 25. I think I hit 3 off the side of the backboard. I didn't even get through all 25 in the minute. Joe Harris, by the way, hit 23 of 25 and didn't even warm up. So I would say that
like
one.
Zoe in the bench press, the video with Nick.
Yeah. I played ball, and I was like, I was a decent player, so I thought that one I would do okay. But the funny thing is that everyone I thought I've done well, I did not do well, and the ones I didn't think I'd do well, I actually ended up doing okay. So there's a lesson in that, I think, which is humility.
The show is called Above Average Joe. It is not Below Average Joe. It's not merely Average Joe. And I do think you prove yourself to be, like, recreationally speaking, a pretty good athlete. And I know you were just in DC. Like, the time you put up in the 10K or the whatever, the 10 miler, that you ran down here was like, I was like, damn, okay, Clay. I'm running six and change miles. Like, that was, wow. You're a pretty good athlete. So what is your athletic background, and what are so people that can watch with the context now after listening to this episode, like, what athletic background are you bringing to this show?
Yeah, you're exposing me. Now everyone's going to know that I'm sandbagging and pretending to be a bad athlete, but I'm actually a decent athlete.
Hey, as I said, it's called Above Average Joe, but you're still it's above average Joe, very below average pro.
Right. I appreciate that. There we go. We're going to have to add that. That's great. And then need to pay you for that creative inspiration.
I was going to say,
there.
Please make sure the check gets in the mail.
Yeah, it will. Magazines, we're flush with cash.
I work in radio. Don't talk to me.
Yeah, exactly. So I grew up playing a lot of sports. I mean, I grew up in Connecticut. Every kid in Connecticut has to play soccer. So I played soccer, loved it. Played t-ball for a while and basketball. Those were the three. Then I quit t-ball. Again, because I was scared of the baseball coming at me too fast. Stuck with basketball and soccer. Picked up lacrosse in middle school, another very Connecticut sport. I ended up giving that up because I kept making the B team, and I couldn't quite crack the A team. So not a great advertisement for my tenacity, but I quit, and I decided to stick with soccer and basketball, and I played those through high school. And then I like to joke that I played at the college level because I played club soccer at Vanderbilt, and I also played on the women's varsity basketball practice squad, which was
that's
really
no
fun.
joke though. Like, you have to
no,
be a
serious.
good player.
Real hoopers do that.
Like, you have to be a really good player to get invited to do that.
Yeah, we had some. We didn't actually. I didn't get invited. You sort of show up, and if you're not terrible, they let you stay. But it was awesome. It was like. I played pickup a lot at the rec, and this was obviously way better and the best pickup I've ever played in my life because we would get our ass kicked. But it was so fun.
That might be a good episode too, just to kind of show that, hey, like, the above average Joes that think that they can compete with the men. Obviously, that's clearly not going to be the case. But for the above average Joes that think that, hey, I could step onto a WNBA game and drop 30. There's some humbling in that too, right? Because those women are for real legit ballers.
Yeah. Any sort of misguided notions I had about that were put to bed very quickly when I played on that practice squad, and especially when I was down in the paint, getting elbows in the ribs and getting crossed over, getting my ankles broken. It's very clear to me that they are better. They're far better players than I am.
Yeah. Right, and that's D1, nevertheless, like WNBA
oh my God.
level ballers. I actually wanted to ask, like, is there a plan to dip into some women's sports and try to showcase that at all? And that's been, I mean, you guys it's not like you've done a ton of episodes, right? You started in 2019, like you said, the pandemic hit, so that obviously puts things on the side for a while. You only do, I think, one a quarter, so these things take time to produce, to plan, shoot, edit, all that kind of stuff. So what are kind of some of the other things that you want to do? Like, what are some future episodes that are on your radar that you'd love to do? And I'm guessing there's some women's sports in there that you'd like to showcase.
Yeah, I think there's it's a great point. I think one episode the golf episode we had, our coach was a woman named Troy Mullins, who is a long drive champion, and that was awesome because she hits the ball 400 yards. Yeah, which is crazy. And some of what we talked about a little bit in that episode was she gets guys challenge her all the time, which is like, what are you thinking?
What are you doing?
She's hit the ball 400 yards. Do you really, like, if you want to get into her Instagram DMs and be like, I think I could outdrive you, like, all right, good luck.
Yeah.
So that was great, and shout out to her because she was a great coach and took my drive from, I think, like 40 yards to 260. Which is 40 yards is not doesn't matter if you're facing
so you're not
men,
a golfer,
women, or babies. You're not beating them at 40 yards. But some of the other ones, I mean, we have a couple in the works. I mean, I think the sports I want to do, I mean, it's not necessarily men or women. It's just like tennis. I mean, we've joked about the ideal tennis episode would be, can I return Serena Williams' serve? Right. Obviously not, but the idea is like, let's see, again, like baseball and like hockey, it's just like, let's get a sense of how difficult this is and how fast this is coming at you. So we've talked about that's one we really want to do. I think it'd be fun to do a track episode. We've talked about one that we floated is, how long can an average Joe maintain Kipchoge's marathon pace? Which, because he's running.
If you could make it 400, well, actually, you're a pretty fast distance runner. Like 400, I couldn't make it 400 meters.
You could. Make it's like 115. It's 115 for 400.
It's probably
I think it's faster than that.
I think he's running a 444. I think, or right around there. So so it's about 110, 111.
Yeah.
Okay, so I could make it 400. I don't think I could. I would die at 800 meters.
Yes.
Absolutely,
exactly.
Pass out, cease to exist if my hamstrings made it that
stop.
long.
Yeah. So I think that would be fun because I run now, so that I think that would be entertaining. We've talked about maybe doing endurance. Like there's talk about maybe doing something with Ironman. Like, could I do a half Iron with a month of training? Again, kind of sandbagging because I have a little bit of a aerobic base from my running, but
right, that swimming is going to get you though.
Totally, and that's another one. I think swimming would be a really fun episode.
Monster.
Yeah,
swimming actually would be fascinating because
and I
the
think
technique there is so important.
Yeah, and I think it'd be fun if you could get. There's not a ton of upside to convince an athlete to compete with you because either they crush you as they should or they lose and then they kind of, it's sort of not a great look for them. But I would love to try to race, could I swim 25 yards in the time it takes Caleb Dressel to swim 75? I think that would just be fun visually to see that comparison.
Right.
Actually, so the Kipchoge thing, the same concept, take it to Katie Ledecky's 1500 time.
Yeah.
And see if you can make it a lap.
Exactly. Because
the pace she keeps is ridiculous.
And it's cool from a video standpoint because you could have that line. In the Olympics, I love when they have that sort of, the Olympic record line in front of them.
Right.
Hey, NBC, can we borrow your line?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by Momentous. Now, I've told you, if you've been a long-time listener, whether it's 100 episodes, 150, 200. Still crazy. This episode 200. But I've been telling you, like, Momentous is the top of the line, the best of the best. Don't believe me? What if I told you that it's in 72% of NFL locker rooms? Would you believe me then? Because guess what? Momentous products are in 72% of NFL locker rooms. I will say this from personal experience. I have seen just in the last month and a half, really since we had Patrick on the podcast, Patrick Dixon from Momentous, their director of applied sports science, I've seen a huge jump in the consistency of my recovery by adding vitamin D and magnesium at night with my Elite Sleep. The Elite Sleep changed my life forever. My recoveries have been so much consistently higher on my Whoop since I started Elite Sleep, but they've taken even another leap since I've added that magnesium and vitamin D. So if you're new to this podcast, make sure you go back just a couple of episodes. Check out Patrick Dixon from Momentous on the pod. He was so incredible in laying out what your daily supplementation would look like. And of course, we're going to hook you up. So go to livemomentous.com, use the code TRAINWITHTHEBEST25. TrainWithTheBest25, livemomentous.com, 25% off your first order and your subscription, 15% off all the refills. That's TrainWithTheBest25 at livemomentous.com. The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by BlazePod, the #1 reaction training system for all levels of sports and fitness. What does that mean? Reactive training. Well, it means that BlazePod, what it actually is, what is a BlazePod? It's a light that can be programmed to light up any number of different colors. It can be on touch. It can be on random time intervals. You can program this series of lights in a variety of ways to do reaction training, to provide a visual stimulus for your athletes to do any number of movements. Could you have them slide to the light? Yes. Could you have them slide to the light if it's blue and run if it's red? Yes. Could you have them slide if it's blue, run if it's red, and not react at all if it's green? Maybe even run the other direction. You could. You could do all of those things. The possibilities are endless. And if you download the BlazePod app, it's got pre-programmed ideas. It also gives you the ability to create your own. It's just the perfect visual stimulus reactive training system. It's why we love it so much. We were using it before they were an advertiser, and now that they're with us, we can't wait to share BlazePod with you. So much so that we got a discount for you. Of course we do, hooking you up, 15% off. Go to blazepod.com, use the code TWTB at checkout. That's 15% off. blazepod.com. The code is TWTB. I'm curious how you pick who you talk to for your writing. So your writing is mostly Q&A style. You have all kinds of interesting people from sports. You have some writers and novelists and other folks that you talk to. A lot of them are health and wellness related or sports related. But I'm just curious, like how do you decide and how do you pitch what who you want to talk to and what you want to write about? Because, where the YouTube stuff is pretty self-explanatory, like you're finding a sports adjacent angle from a performance standpoint and drawing that comparison. It seems like your writing is a lot more of just kind of what's interesting to you in the moment, which I think is awesome. And it's kind of a dream job. It sounds like, I would imagine, in a way, if you don't have a lot of constrictions on what you can and can't do.
You pretty much nailed it. I mean, I will say that I am very grateful for this job for many reasons, but one of them is that sort of the ethos of the editorial staff and the people who are above me at GQ is like, we hire people we think are interesting and we empower them to pursue the things they're curious about and interested in, and with the assumption that if they're interested in it, they'll bring a level of passion and enthusiasm that our readers will resonate, that'll resonate with our readers. And so, to your point, Craig, it is mostly, what am I interested in? And again, you need to have a level of, okay, well, why are we talking to this person and why are we talking to them now? That's sort of two questions we always want to answer in our pitch is like, why is this person relevant? Why are they relevant now? Right. But as long as you can sort of answer that, and some of the times that's they have a book coming out or they have a movie or they're in a new show. But as long as you can answer that and give a good sort of reason for why we should be talking to them, then we're usually empowered to talk to those people. And so it's awesome to be able to do that. Now, very occasionally there'll be a different scenario where we have this person, we're putting it in the magazine. Who's a writer we have who can tackle this? So that's a little more top down as opposed to bottom up, but it's great. I mean, it is a very lucky job to get to do something this interesting and to talk to people I'm curious about.
do you have like I'm sure you have on some level a wish list on that front as well. Like, you know, you're just hoping so and so does something that they're in the news and they're like open to doing interviews. Like, do you have kind of that dream interview? I want that 15-minute Q&A with person X, and I really want to ask them about thing Y.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few. I have, I mean, one is a podcaster actually. Well, he's a podcaster slash actor, but is Dax Shepard. I think he would be so interesting to talk to. A few athletes. I mean, I find Kyrie Irving fascinating.
Yes.
For many reasons, and he doesn't really talk to the media, so I think that's probably a long shot. But he'd be someone I'd be very interested in. I'm a huge fan of Justin Vernon, Bon Iver, and he's like, his music is so out there and kind of strange. I think he could be a fun one. So those would definitely be three of the ones that are at the very top of my list.
What's kind of your next goal on the fitness side of things? Like you just did the 10 miler down here in DC. Do you have do you want to run a marathon? Have you run a marathon? Like, do you want to do a half? Like, what's the Clay Skipper training plan?
Yeah, I guess you're gonna make me say this out loud, which is a great accountability mechanism because then I got to do it. But I have a half coming up.
Here we go.
I have a half coming up at April 24th, so 2 weeks from Sunday.
Okay.
I'm gonna try for 125 because there's something called.
What was your 10-mile time?
10 mile was. Wow, why can I not remember it? It was 65, 40, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So that's going to
be... I think I ran it...
He can run.
I ran it at a 6:34 pace. To do a 125 half, I'd have to run at 6:28.
Right. That's what I mean. So, like, it's slightly faster.
For a longer distance.
Yeah, but
so,
and
it's
for
just
3
an
more
extra
miles.
5K. I mean, who's counting?
Yeah, right.
So there's that, because if you run 125, you can get into something called the Speed Project. Have you guys heard of that? It's
I think so. Actually,
so
is that the LA to Vegas?
Exactly. So
thing?
it's 6 people. I think it's 6. You get 6 people and you run from LA to Vegas. It's like get there however you want, but you have to run. And so you just have 6 people, and you're running like 50 miles a person over the course of 72 hours. So you have to like have certain thresholds you've hit to be allowed in, and one of those is a 125 half marathon. So, and then we'll see if this happens. I'm trying to get the New York City Marathon. If I do, I might try to do that under 3. If I could go sub 3, I'd be happy with that. But
what's your training like for this distance stuff, and like how do you try to like, and in some ways, like we were talking about this before we started recording, like the freedom you have as a media person sometimes is great, where your schedule is all over the place. Like how is the uniqueness of your job help you to also, you know, perform at a high level as an athlete?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I feel like I have a lot of time to devote to exercise, which I again feel very grateful for. But yeah, I mean, I'm usually running, I would say 4 times a week, and I usually try to do Tuesday, Thursday. Our Tuesday is usually a track workout, which is usually like very short distance at a very high pace, and then Thursday is a tempo workout, which is high pace but like not super high because you're going a little bit longer. So that would be like, you know, can you do 3 miles at 7 minutes or something, like 7 a mile. Saturday or Sunday is a long run, and then Monday's usually just like an easy, just coasting, just to like get my legs back. So yeah, I mean, 4 times a week. I mean, there's some people I work with on staff who are they're 2 guys who are sub 3 marathoners, and like they're putting up like 60, 70 mile weeks. I'm only probably doing like 25 miles on a good week. So, but yeah, I do have a lot of time for it, which is great. But today I'm going to go to the track.
Sounds like we invited the right guy on the podcast, Chris. That sounds much more like how we'd recommend a training plan.
Yeah.
25. We don't need those 60 mile weeks. Get that out of here.
25. If I run 25 in a quarter, I'd be happy.
Yeah, I'm saying what we would recommend. No way either of us are running 25 a week. Are you kidding me?
No, not even close.
Chris is like, is it over 40 yards? I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out.
Well, I mean, I will say the track stuff is like, I mean, that's where you're working, right? Like, I think people often think of the distance and they're like, oh, that's so hard. And it is hard. It is challenging. But, like, if you're doing 4 400s, that's to me, that's harder
Yeah,
in some
I did
ways
that
than
yesterday. It was terrible.
than like a 10-mile run.
Yeah. See, to me that's easier for me.
Yeah.
I'd rather give you 400s, knock them out in like 60, 65 or whatever, than have to run 10 miles over 3 hours or whatever. Like I just wouldn't be able to do that. I would stop and.
It's because you're a football player. Like you're like 8 seconds. That was a long play. Screw this.
Yeah, that is a long play. Yeah,
I actually, in preparation for this, I was going back and listening to. I scrolled through the podcast that you hosted for GQ leading up to the Olympics,
Yeah.
and one of the people you talked to was Molly Seidel, and I now am imagining you just nodding along vigorously when she talked about shifting into the distance away from the shorter runs, because that seems to be where you're at too.
Yeah, she was the best. I was so glad I got to talk to her. It was so awesome that she then went out and won the bronze in the Olympic marathon. For people listening, this is a marathoner by the name of Molly Seidel, who was a professional runner but didn't really run long distances. And then the second marathon she ever entered was the Olympic trials, and I think she finished second. Wow. And then she went to the Olympics as sort of an outside, long shot, and she finished third, and she got the bronze.
In her third ever marathon.
Yeah, third ever
in
marathon.
the Olympics.
Wow.
By the way, a momentous athlete, sponsor of this podcast.
There you go.
We share a supplement company,
Shout
so
out.
we're basically buddies. We're
But-
hoping to have her on eventually, but we'll see.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, the most interesting thing I remember her saying was that she was like, a lot of people look at professional runners and they think we are so comfortable out there. And she's like, the only difference is that professionals are just way better at maintaining discomfort. So she's like, we're feeling just as bad as you guys are. We're just able to stay at that threshold way longer. And I thought that was really interesting.
I'll wrap up with this. Do you ever, because I'm admitting I would 100% do this. You have the ability to be like, hey, it's Clay Skipper from GQ. And whether it's for a piece or for the YouTube series, you've had access to these really incredible coaches. Is part of like the Kipchoge one, you're like, how can I get a really high-end running coach to give me advice and get to this sub 3-hour marathon? That's somewhere in the back of your head? Did I just uncover something?
Oh, yeah, of course. You're not running like a little bit of a scam all the time. Like, what are you doing? You're not even trying. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. What's the coolest piece of coaching advice? Actual last question. Like, what's the coolest, like, whether it's running adjacent to like something that you will actually use over the long term, or just like a kind of a holy shit moment while you're working with Quincy Avery or doing the baseball stuff or whatever it is, where you're just like, oh wow, that was so cool to like watch a truly elite coach have something click for you in a certain moment as you're working towards a task.
Quincy Avery was awesome just because I got a sense of like the demeanor of a coach and how that can give you confidence. Like, he just exudes so much enthusiasm and belief in you, which I think he was sort of faking, because man, I'm terrible at throwing a football. But he like so exudes that charisma and confidence that you're like, maybe I can do it. Like, maybe he's onto something. So that was a really interesting lesson in just like what it takes to be an incredible coach, and how much of it's not necessarily the content of what you're delivering, but how you're delivering it. And if you look at the YouTube comments, I have looked at these comments on the football video, they're all about how great a coach Quincy is. They're like, man, can this guy come coach me in my life? Like, he was just so awesome. The one though that really I remember standing out also is Ray Allen. We got him for a Zoom video when we were doing the can I shoot 90% free throw percentage, and I was asking him, like, when you get up there, what are you thinking about? How are you calming your mind? He was like, man, if you were thinking about it, you've already so lost the battle. He's like, you have to put in so much preparation, and you have to have so much confidence because of that preparation, that when you go up there, you're not even considering, can I miss this? It's going in, and it's just muscle memory, and it's just swish after swish. And he was like, I think the greatest, or definitely one of the greatest free throw shooters of all time.
Yeah, I think he finished. He might have been above 90% for his career. If not, he was extremely high 80s, and one of the all-time greatest shooters in the history of the NBA.
But it's like him and
if people want more.
Sorry, I was going to jump in and say no.
Ahead.
I mean, I also talked to Colin Morikawa and Justin Tucker, and like those guys, same thing. They're like, when I get up there, it's just my swing I've done 100 times, or my 100 times, thousands of times, or my kick I've done, and it's just. You have to build that confidence before you get up there. And it's interesting to hear athletes talk about that.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
You put in the work, and then you rely on it. If people want more from Clay Skipper, Twitter, Instagram at Clay Skipper, and then just search Clay Skipper. You can literally Google Clay Skipper, and it'll take you a link straight to his GQ, his GQ writing, and of course search YouTube for Above Average Joe. And the series is great. Looking forward to the next one coming out here, hopefully in the next quarter. I feel like we're due. It's Q2, Clay. Let's go. We gotta have one.
I
coming
know.
soon.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Let's make it happen.
This
Put
was
some
a
pressure on.
blast, man, and let's definitely do it again sometime. And
Hey, you got the World Cup coming up, so maybe if there's some soccer stuff that we can help you out with, we know some people.
we do.
So.
That is true.
No,
got
I
some
know that. I see
connections.
quite a roster of former podcast guests and friends of the pod. So I might take you up on
Yes.
that.
Well,
let's do it.
we would be eager to do it. Clay Skipper from GQ with us here on the Train with the Best podcast. Clay, this was great, man, and look forward to doing it again. Hopefully, not too far in the future.
Thank you guys. Another 200 episodes. We'll do it again.
Let's
do it.
That seems like a long time.